All right, good afternoon, everybody. Let's get started. There we go. So we're going to be talking a little bit about construct validity and measurement. Hopefully, you've seen the video lectures, my two-part video lecture, and then also the really fantastic lectures from Miami University, which cover and really reinforce a lot of the important things about testing. Today I'm really talking about the whole issue of construct validity, not that much focused on testing, but it's impossible to separate the two. I'll create a little discussion board. So if you have any questions about those videos or this video lecture, you can post on the video board and I can answer. So I write a note to myself. Discussion board. Okay, so let's get going. Uh, what I really want to focus on is the idea of operational definitions. Uh, to preface this, let me just say that any science, the issue of measurement is critically important. And if you look at the history of physics or you look at the history of chemistry, they were struggling for centuries with the issue of measurement. And you know, measuring physical quantities accurately and reliably, that's very, very difficult. Measuring psychological quantities is even more difficult. So psychology is at a place where physics and chemistry was 500 years ago. So we're really trying to get a handle on measuring things, and the idea of operational definitions, of reliability and validity, all of these are tools to help us have accurate measures of psychological traits. So the first part of this is operational definitions. The operational definition must do three things. It should precisely describe something so that another researcher could read your description and exactly replicate your operational definition. In the method sections of experiments, you will see these precise definitions, and an important thing that reviewers are looking for when they're reviewing, peer reviewing an article is whether or not it really is the definitions are operational definitions and can be replicated. Uh, the next element is that the procedure to create the behavior and the procedure to measure the behavior should be publicly observable and unambiguous. If I say that I am creating, you know, I am creating negative affect by giving a student negative feedback on an exam, that process of giving negative feedback to a student should be publicly observable. If I say that I'm measuring helping behavior by whether or not a subject will move boxes and how many boxes they'll move for a researcher if they request them to help them move boxes around the lab, that would be something that's publicly observable. By unambiguous, I mean a couple different things. First of all, it has to be either or. It can't be, maybe this happened. Uh, One easy way to really define unambiguous is to say that we need to create numbers from any operational definition. So, for example, in my operational definition about helping behavior, we have several boxes that the researcher wants the subject to help them move, and we count the number of boxes that the subject picks up and carries for the researcher. So it's unambiguous in that if a subject picks up a box and moves it to where it should be, that's one. And it's not like a little bit of helping or a lot of helping, but it's unambiguous. It's one box out of 10. And so you have 1 box out of 10, 5 boxes out of 10, 10 boxes out of 10. It's unambiguous if it's a little helping or a lot of helping or what. There's a number associated with it. So it's very clear how much helping was done. And then the third part of the definition of operational definitions is that it should make sense. That is, high scores on the operational definition should mean you have more of the construct. And going back to my moving boxes, so the idea that somebody is more helpful or engages in more helping, the more boxes they move, that certainly makes sense. And so we're looking to see that the operational definitions are not just clearly defined, but they, in a way, relate conceptually to the amount of the construct we're trying to measure or create. And I've kind of skipped over this, so I should circle back and be specific about this. And let me get my pen going. Well, let's do laser pointer. I said the procedure to create or the behavior observed. And we can talk about operational definitions of an independent variable. An independent variable is going to be a manipulation. It's going to be some type of stimulus or change in the environment or change in the situation or verbal instructions. That's what independent variables usually are. And we need operational definitions for the independent variable. That is, we need to precisely describe the stimuli we're presenting to subjects, the instructions we're giving to the subjects, or the situation we're creating for the subjects to be in. And then there could be operational definitions for the dependent variables, the behaviors observed. And there we're observing the amount of helping as a dependent variable, and we're measuring that. The operational definition for that is the number of boxes moved. So we have operational definitions both for the independent variable, which usually involves creating a situation and precisely describing that situation, and that situation in a way making sense, in that if somebody is in the negative mood condition, it should make sense that they should feel bad or feel worse than if they were in the control condition. And so those are the ways that we think about operational definitions. To think about operational definitions as a psychologist, you need to go beyond their normal everyday definitions and think about their presence in an experiment. And so this table talks about different concepts: punishment, learning, anxiety, and presents us with the typical everyday dictionary definition and an operational definition from an experiment. Punishment is a harsh or injurious treatment when someone does something wrong. Punishment to a psychologist is something specific, such as the presentation of a 3 milliamp shock for half a second following a specified behavior. Learning means acquiring knowledge or skill. The operational definition is a change in behavior as a function of practice. Intelligence is your ability to learn or understand from experience. The operational definition would be the score on a Stanford-Binet test or the Reshler intelligence test. Thirst would be defined normally as the distressful feeling caused by our need for water. The operational definition would be a certain amount of time without water. So as you can see from this chart, and stop the video and take a look at it, these are the ways that psychologists would operationally define these concepts in an experiment. Let me give you an example. So we have a construct, the sense of direction. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean when we say somebody has a good sense of direction or he has a bad sense of direction? And well, what that really means is the person knows which way to go. So, with that idea of what the construct means, we can talk about creating a dependent variable which would measure a sense of direction in terms of how much somebody knows which way to go. So, going from the purely conceptual to an operational definition, we would need to figure out a way of precisely creating a publicly observable and unambiguous measure, and high scores on the measure would correspond or make sense to a better sense of direction, a better sense of which way to go. And so to do that, here would be my operational definition of sense of direction. Participants would sit at the table in the York Atrium. The table would be 5 feet back from the wall with the York logo. Participants will sit facing the logo, and they'll be asked not to turn their heads and stare ahead and look at the researcher. The participant will be asked the following questions. Which direction do you want to go to get to the blank, left or right? And then the subject would be asked that question for these different locations. This is an old example because I have the bookstore listed and the cafeteria. Okay, so we'd have to come up with new ones, but the subway station. And now think about it. You're sitting facing the York logo. Which way do you go to get to the subway station, left or right? The subject has to answer left or right, and it's unambiguous. They say left, they mean left, and either that's the correct direction. For the subway, it is the correct direction. For the ATM, left is not. Yeah. For the counseling center, left is not the correct direction. And so we give them a 1 for a correct choice and 0 for a non-correct choice. So a higher score means that they know the way to go better than a lower score. And so that would give us a good construct which measures a subject's or a student's sense of direction. All right, so we could do this assignment, create and identify constructs, and create operational definitions. Here are 11 statements about experiments and experimental results. And normally in class I ask students to think about these and work on these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple, and then I'm going to ask you to do a couple and submit them online. So let's look at memory improves with regular exercise. So that statement is talking about the results of an experiment. It's talking about an independent variable and a dependent variable and a relationship between the two. And in this case, it would be that exercise would be the independent variable, and the higher the level of regular exercise, the better the memory. And memory would be a dependent variable. And so to fill out the rest of that experiment, you'd need an operational definition of the IV and the DV. So for the IV, the operational definition would be the experimental group would go to the lab for 30 minutes of exercise 3 times a week for 5 weeks. And that's our operational definition of regular exercise. The control group would go to the lab for 30 minutes of solving anagrams in the lab 3 times a week for 5 weeks. And that's our control condition. And again, it makes sense that the subjects who are going to the lab for 30 minutes of exercise for 5 weeks are getting in their lives more exercise, more regular exercise than the control group. And then we need to measure memory. A common way to do that is with a digit span test, where you give subjects a series of digits, 7, 2, 8, 1, 6, 5. You wait a couple seconds, a specified number of seconds, and then you ask the subjects to repeat them back. The number of digits they get correct is their score. And this is a very, very common measure of short-term memory. Another example, proper nutrition aids in alertness in the classroom. And so what that's saying is that the independent variable is nutrition and the dependent variable is alertness, and that good nutrition or having proper nutrition increases the alertness. So we could operationally define nutrition as the parents of children fill out a diary of the child's eating habits. And then, of course, the diaries need to be rated by nutritionists on a set of standards, which produce numbers. For example, a scale of 0 to 100 on how nutritious a child's diet is. And then the dependent variable would be the teacher, who is blind to the study and study conditions, is asked to rate each child's alertness daily. And we can say, does this make sense? Uh, does following typical nutrition guidelines mean that you're having a more proper nutrition? Yes, it does. It will create a number, and we can look at the subject's number for nutrition, and a higher number on nutrition would mean they're getting a more proper diet. And then teachers would be asked to rate students' alertness each day. We'd average them together for student. And so that a teacher would rate the student's alertness on 1 to 10 being very alert. And that would be a good operational definition, not great, of a teacher measuring alertness. And then this would be a correlational study. We'd correlate nutrition score with alertness score, and we would find a positive relationship. And one final example, religious people are friendlier than non-religious people. And this is an example of how the ideas of operational definitions and reliability come together, or testing and measurement come together. Excuse me. So our quasi-independent variable would be subjects would be asked to take the religious commitment inventory for adolescents. This is a 11 items scale, I think. The alpha level is 0.96. That is Cronbach alpha is 0.96. It is valid and reliable. And then to measure friendliness, the agreeableness scale of the NEOPI, the Big Five inventory. And the agreeableness scale has a Cronbach alpha of 0.86. So I say this is a quasi-IV because we're just measuring variables. And so we're not randomly assigning subjects to condition. And what I would do, so because we're not randomly assigning them to condition, that's a quasi or a not really perfect independent variable, or kind of an independent variable, but it's not a true independent variable. Oh, my cat wanted in, now she wants out. Decide. And then again, we would correlate these scores together. Okay, so for the first assignment on Blackboard, in groups of 4 or less than 4, I say, so that's 3, 1, 2, or 3, or individually, choose 2 and develop the ODs as in the previous examples. One must be a manipulated experiment, and the other could be another manipulated experiment or an observational experiment. Submit this on Blackboard by midnight. So these are the options. Choose 2. One should be manipulated. The other could be whatever you want. Okay, so this next assignment is really about tests. Because as you noticed in the last examples, I was using a lot of pre-existing tests. So I want you to look directly at some of the tests that we talk about. So in groups of less than 4, or individually, choose one scale from the next page and answer the following questions. Submit it on Blackboard by midnight. And the questions are, give me a short definition of your scale, find a study which uses the scale, what measure of reliability was used, what was the measured reliability, what's the coefficient of determination, and how much error was in the measurement. Then finally brainstorm and answer this question: What behavior could you use as a criterion measure for your scale? That is, what behavior would correlate well with your scale? That is, the idea of criterion measures is that we have a scale and we would like to have a measure of validity. And so we're talking about criterion validity. So we want to give people the scale and we want to get their score on the scale, and then we want to correlate that score with some measure of behavior. And we hope that higher scores on the scale would correlate with higher scores on the criterion measure. As an example of what I'm looking for, not much. So I did the BEM sexual inventory. Duh, I did my thesis and dissertation on it, so I didn't have to look anything up. Short definition, a measure of gender, psychological gender, masculinity, and femininity. Find a study which uses the scale. Ashton and Fuhrer, 1990, that was easy. What measure of reliability was used? Cronbach alpha. What was the measured reliability? 0.78. 0.87 for the masculinity scale, 0.78 for the femininity scale. What is the coefficient of determination and how much error was in the measurement? So as I said in the online video, you just square the reliability measures to get the coefficient of determination. And that means that 60% of the femininity score is a measure of the trait, femininity. And then what's left is error, so 40% is error. 40% of the score is error. And for masculinity, it's 75 and 25. Measure of the train. No, that should be trait. Brainstorm. What could you use as a criterion measure for your scale? For femininity, out of 100 people, how many would agree to be videoed while cuddling a kitten? And I would imagine that people who are more feminine would be more likely to agree to that. So out of 100 people, you would get more people with higher femininity scores agreeing to do that. Masculinity, agreeing to be videoed while changing a tire. And so you would imagine that the greater your score on masculinity on the BEM sexual inventory, the more likely you would want to be videoed changing a tire. The lower your score, the less likely you want to be videoed. So out of 100 people, those who would agree would have a higher masculinity score. And you could do that with a point by serial correlation. All right, so the scales I want you to choose from, Marlow-Crone, Rosenberg, self-esteem, self-monitoring, need for cognition, and belief in a just world. And so for Tuesday's lab, watch the prep videos. I have about 4 SPSS walkthroughs. THR, yeah. Watch and take notes because you're going to be doing the same thing as in those videos. And if individuals or groups would like to talk to me on Zoom about the intro sections, email me and we'll set something up for Friday or Monday so we can talk about that. Saturday. Yeah, Saturday or Monday so we can talk about that before our next class and so you can get going. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for your attention.